coaching and change. Have you thought about coaching as a precursor to helping make change? That's our topic today, right here in the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We're here each week to help you lead more confidently and make a bigger difference, both professionally and personally. This episode is brought to you by Kevin's Daily Newsletter. The Daily Newsletter is a short email delivered Monday through Friday, written to inspire, engage, and focus you on becoming the best person and leader you can be. Learn more and sign up at remarkablepodcast.com/daily. And now here's your host, Kevin.
Welcome back to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, everyone. I hope it's back. If this is your first time, you're going to be glad you're here, and it won't be your last. Question for you. Do you want to be a leader worth following? Someone people choose to follow? Because ultimately, if you think you're leading and no one's following, you're just taking a walk. And I know that I share that sentiment with my guest today, Jeremie Kubicek, and let me introduce him, and then we'll dive in and have a conversation. Jeremie is a powerful communicator, a serial entrepreneur, and content builder. He creates content using some of the world's, used by some of the world's largest companies, found in the books he's authored, including his newest book, The 10X Leader, 5 Voices, 5 Gears, and the national bestseller, Making Your Leadership Come Alive. Jeremie is the executive chairman of Giant, a company that certifies coaches and consultants that serve companies and their employees. Jeremie has started over 20 companies while living in Oklahoma City, Moscow. I'm assuming that's Russia and not Idaho. Atlanta and London, and now he is residing in and talking to us today from Oklahoma City. He is passionate about providing coaches and leaders with tools and certifications they need to increase the performance of individuals and teams. Jeremie, so glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm excited to talk with you and just to have all types of conversations.
Well, let's do it. As I introduce you, you've got a varied background in lots of different things. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah.
Give us the high level, like what leads you to where you are today, sir?
Yeah. So I had an apprentice, professor in college, who said, what if you use business as a platform for impact, for good? And I'm like, all right, how do I do that? So he took me to Asia for a term, and I viewed all these companies in Asia. And then this was right after the walls of communism fell, and we had a partnership. He had a partnership with an educator in Moscow. So the idea was, what if we started a economic school in Moscow? And we did. So we moved over. So I moved from my senior year of college to, who says we can't was a motto of ours. And we literally moved over with a group of other students, and we started a marketing consulting business, an economic school, an accounting training business. And this was in the early 90s. And it was Chicago in the 30s. It was chaos and crazy. My first book, Making Your Leadership Come Alive, has all the mafia stories, a client assassinated, coup attempt, all those things that you went through. So when you get that early entrepreneurial bug and that hook, and then you have an experience like we did for 2 years in Russia, it changes you forever.
Well, that leads you all the way to today and the work that you do at Giant, which we'll have a chance to talk about a little later. So a provocative title for a book, The 100X Leader. So what is a 100X leader, Jeremie?
Yeah, so if you think about 100X, you go, well, what are the other options? And we break them down to go, well, you could have a 40 divide, you could have a 60 minus, you could have a 75 plus, or you could have a 100X. And the reality is most leaders are between 60 minus and 75 plus. And what I mean by that is 60 minus is worn out, jaded, cynical, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tom. Yeah. Isn't he great? Right. And all of that goes on in our society to 75 plus, which is where most leaders reside, which is basically positively reactive. meaning, hey, sure, Kevin, if you need me, my door's always open. You come to me. You let me know.
Just let me know what I can do.
That's right. So therefore, it's up to you. I'm positive, generally good, but I'm not positively proactive. So the difference between a positively proactive and a positive reactive person is unbelievably wide. There's not enough 100x leaders in the world. So I simply use the metaphor of Mount Everest and the metaphor of Sherpa in particular. It says the best leaders on the planet are Sherpa, because the idea on Mount Everest is they are climbing and helping people climb. So it's a combination. That means they have to be healthy enough to climb, and they have to have a mindset of helping other people climb. The goal of a Sherpa is not to make it to the top. The goal is how many people can I help make it to the top? And there's a very big difference between the two.
So I guess that leads to the next question. That obviously, if you all are watching, and most people I know are listening to this podcast, but you can always go watch it. Go to remarkablepodcast.com to see them. Go to YouTube, find them there as well. But you told us why you use this metaphor, and I think it's very powerful. It's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. And you beat me to it. But the question I would ask is, the logical one is: have you climbed Everest? Have you climbed a mountain like this? Like, where did you? I mean, it's a wonderful metaphor. Do you have personal experience?
Yeah. So no is the answer, to be in all transparency, and it's one of those things where I probably don't even want to. After I interviewed so many people, I interviewed climbers and Sherpa on Mount Everest and at base camp. And so Wi-Fi at base camp was unbelievably good, and I literally had all Zoom calls with Sherpa. But what happened was I actually started with the metaphor climbing and kind of, traditional metaphor. And then after talking to all the climbers, they're like, no, it's not about us. It's about the Sherpa. And they started introducing me to the Sherpa. And I started to learn about this tribe of people. It's unbelievable. They're not butlers. They don't carry things. They are, what they're doing is they're going up ahead of you to make sure the rope is set, and make sure that you have all the support you need. And then they take 4 or 5 climbers and they become the guide on the mountain, and they're pushing people and calling them up, and they're learning the different personality types. And it was just like, oh my goodness, like a Sherpa, all of the climbers I talked to wanted to follow the Sherpa. They trusted him with their life. And I realized that most leaders, every leader is a Sherpa in a metaphor form, whether they know it or not. But they could be an asthmatic Sherpa. Nobody wants to follow an asthmatic Sherpa up the mountain, right? I mean, you think about it. It's like,
probably not. The higher they get, the more labored it becomes for them, the less capable they become.
So you think about then the idea, are you a leader that people want to follow or have to follow? So the very definition of following and leading is simply like, look, I'm going to make the donuts and help you make the donuts. I'm going to climb and help you climb. I'm going to perform and help you perform. But so leaders might be 7 out of 10 in performing, but a 2 out of 10 in leading other performers. That's the leadership conundrum. That's the issue, is because most people haven't thought of their responsibility is to be a Sherpa, to help people get up the mountain. And versus, hey, I'm up here. Let's go. Come on, get up here. Come on, guys.
That's not why we got promoted, Jeremy. We got promoted because we were the best accountant, because we were the best engineer, because we were the fastest on the line. So first of all, maybe we're good at doing the work of leading. What we are for sure good at is doing the work that we used to do, right? And then there's the first gap, and then the gap you're describing between developing others to do that work is a much bigger gap. How do we as organizations change that mindset?
So it's the understanding of who are the most important people in your organization. And if you get this right, on a mountain, a guide would say the most important people are the Sherpa, not the climbers. Because the Sherpa, if they're not healthy, if they make wrong decisions, then they affect the climbers. So if you think about an organization is made up of teams, and every team has a team leader, the team leaders are the most important people in the organization. So let's say you have 200 employees and you have 20 team leaders. Those 20 team leaders, how healthy are they? And are you focused on that? And what we find is, the leadership team kind of goes, hey, can we get everyone on the same page and just make it happen? Come on, everybody, get on the same page. Dadgummit, make it happen. What they haven't done is they haven't created relational trust. They haven't worked on communication. They haven't thought about who their team leaders are. They haven't invested in the team leaders. There's not a time or a system and approach. So if you want to change your entire organization, you focus on the team leader and like have a consistent process of making those team leaders the best leaders on the planet. I mean, they need to be the healthiest people in the room, because what happens at the team leader level is where you get either engagement or compliance by your employees. And that is a key thought. You're either engaged or compliant, all based on either I have to follow the team leader or I
choose to want to. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And so we often talk about leaders as being the leverage point, right? And I love that you're not just saying leaders, but you're saying team leaders, the front line, the people leading teams, that I think is absolutely critically important. One of the things, Jeremie, that I think that in my experience, and I know from the book that we are in agreement on, is that as leaders, one of the most critical things that we can do well, that many of us don't do well, is setting and then managing clear expectations. Can we talk about that a little bit? What are the keys from your perspective about managing expectations in the leadership role?
Yeah, so first expectation is, where are we going? Where are we going? Hey guys, we're going to Camp 4 today. We're going to the summit today. All right, well, we're at Camp 1 and none of us are ready. It's impossible to go to the summit right now. So you have impossible expectations, hoping. So a lot of leaders, what they'll do is they'll create impossible expectations, hoping that will motivate people, and then they'll take half. But they don't tell people they'll take half. So what that does is it then feels all the employees and all the team leaders go, that's impossible. There's no way we can. And then they become compliant. Let's do just enough to keep our job. And then they miss expectations, and then they yell and they require more and more and more, versus setting and having straight conversations about, all right, team, hey, we think we can make it to Camp 2 today. We think we can get here today. Everyone else agree? Yeah. Okay. It's going to be a stretch, but it's realistic. It's not unrealistic, and it's not. So that's a key component. The other part is just communicating. A lot of things are here and then are never shared. Especially men have a really hard time sharing expectations with people. They have them, but they have a hard time sharing them, whether it's with a spouse, with their kids, with their team. And then people miss expectations, which then creates bitterness. So, and frustration and
disappointment and stress and anxiety. We could go right on down the top 10 list there. And I think that I'm listening to you say this, I'm listening, and people are watching or listening are thinking about, okay, yeah, I've been in that loop that you're describing, right? Said I'm happy here, people don't even rank that, and then I get more frustrated, and so then I try to raise it again, and we move from expectations to exhortation, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
That's right.
And yet we keep seeing it. And one of the points that you're making is, if we don't clearly describe them, how can people possibly know them?
Right.
It's not in people's job description, nor in their capacity to read your mind. And the second thing is, if we set them so far up that they're immediately a demotivator that's a problem too. So what's the right answer? Like, we want people to have, we want to set high goals. We want to have high expectations. But if that demotivates or that doesn't work, what's the right answer, Jeremy?
Well, it starts with motive and intent around relationship. So Kevin, do you know that I'm for you? Or do you feel like I'm against you? Or do you feel like I'm for myself? And if you feel that I'm for myself, you're going to be jaded. If you feel like I'm against you, you're going to put a wall up, self-preservation. But if you feel that I'm for you, then you'll allow me to work with you to push, which then leads to support first before challenge. Do you have?
Yeah, I want to get to that point because that's a huge idea in the book. But before we get there, just what Jeremy just said, just think about that. If we don't get that right, we can't possibly have psychological safety on our team. And if we don't get that right, we can't possibly have trust on our team between us and those that we lead. And given the positional differential, because we're the boss, it doesn't mean that we can't have high levels of trust, but we're already starting at a deficit, right? Because people have all this baggage about the boss, and they are the boss and all that stuff. So we're already working at a deficit. And if we go where Jeremy's saying, we've got no shot of getting to either of those critical things.
Absolutely.
Agree, comment?
No, 100%. And so it comes back to the idea of truly at the core, are you for your people? And do they know it? And what typically takes place is what is got to make the donuts, pressure of clients, pressure of your boss, trying to please other people, other things, and then taking advantage of it, like, yeah, my team knows I care for them, right? My family knows I love them. Well, actually, do they? Doesn't really feel like you're for me.
They hope you do.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a quick story? I haven't told this story in 100 years. Long ago in a faraway land, I had the chance to be like, well, I don't know what they call them, a grad assistant in the Dale Carnegie course. When my first job out of college, I was asked to encouraged to take the Dale Carnegie course. I did. They asked me to come back as a grad assistant. And there's a step, a talk that people give in that. And one of the recurring themes in the 3 times that I was involved, once as a participant and twice as a helper, is the number of people who say they never heard or have never said to someone that they love them. It comes up over and over there. And all of us probably know someone or have had a conversation with someone for whom they never heard that from their parent. And they can say, well, I know that by their actions that they do, and yet it's not the same.
Absolutely. No, it's the power of word, but it's also the power of word with deed. So it's the combination, right? And that's where the problem with hypocrisy is. It's rampant in our society because people are asked to do things that they're not seeing their leaders do. And what we're trying to do in the 100X Leader book and in our work in Giant is to actually make that congruent. What you say and what you do are one and the same. But we're giving tools. So first, it's mindset. Do you know you're a Sherpa? If you get there, oh my gosh, yeah, I've not been leading like that. I've been leading like a climber, not like a Sherpa. Okay, now you have the tools. Now, what are the tools to help you be a Sherpa? Which is really what we spend the rest of the book on.
Right. So, hey, not only am I a climber, but I'm a good climber, and I've been climbing longer than you. So just follow me, which leads us perhaps back to your point, to compliance, rather than engagement or commitment. So you mentioned it, and it's really where I want to unpack what sort of maybe a lot of the rest of the time that we have is this idea of challenge and support. You hinted at it. I kind of put you on pause. So let's talk about this idea. It's a central idea in the book, and I think an important one for us to talk about.
So let's think about on Mount Everest or any large mountain. What's the most essential tool available? Like number one, hands down, it's not an axe. It's not crampons for your feet. It's rope. If you don't have rope, you do not climb, right? So if you think about
Makes sense. I was thinking oxygen, but yes, I think you're right. Without that's probably goes without stating. But yeah, I get it. Without rope, we got a problem.
we got a problem. So the idea then, every leader needs a tool. This tool, the power tool that we use, is called the support challenge matrix. And it's the concept and the idea that every single person needs high support and they need high challenge. And if you do those in conjunction, if you can learn to calibrate them, then it's like you're a magic Sherpa. You're like, oh my goodness, you're using rope on everything. So you think about most of us are not natural to both. So to bring high support and high challenge means that you're in the liberate quadrant, that you've learned how to empower people, you've learned how to bring opportunity. You think about someone in your life who was so for you, but they pushed you to the highest level. It's probably the highest level of respect. You would follow them. It's not kumbaya though. It wasn't all hugs. It wasn't, I mean, they pushed you, but you knew they're for you. So that is rope. That is high support and high challenge. With any individual, you have to start with support first. If you start with challenge first, they don't know if you're for them or not.
They don't know. Yeah, they don't know your intent, right?
So if they know support and they feel support, then they feel, and you'll allow them to challenge you. Then you'll revere them and you'll want to follow them, not have to follow them. But most of us have not experienced that. We've either experienced high support with no challenge, a lot of hinting, a lot of like rah-rah, kumbaya, or we've experienced high challenge and no support, which feels like demeaning. It feels like fear, manipulation. It's yelling. It's the football coach. Kevin, come on. If you can't do it, someone else, get someone else in here. Come on, right? And that's motivating in their mind. The problem is it's like lighting a fire underneath someone. Lighting a fire underneath them doesn't last very long. It's a short-term motivation, and over time, it doesn't lead people to engagement. It just leads them to more compliance. So the idea then is to calibrate high support and high challenge, and to learn how to do it really, really well, depending on what your tendencies are. If you're a thinker, you have a tendency to be more of a dominant personality, high challenge to low support. If you're a feeler, you have a tendency to support, but with no expectation.
Or I hope they'll figure it out. Or, yeah, exactly. So lots of stuff that we could unpack there. But really, at the end of the day, Jeremy, people need to get a copy of the book, The 100X Leader, which helps you think about that balance, that connection between challenge and support. Now, the nature of your business at Giant is really about coaching. And so I didn't want us to leave without talking a little bit about your perspective about that. And I think we could say, okay, why does organizations need coaches? We could have that conversation, but I'd rather have ask this question. Why do leaders need coaches?
Yeah. Well, so you need someone who can actually push you to the next level. And that's, if you want to be a mediocre, if you want to be an average leader, you're not going to have anyone in your life. And when I say coaches, you can be internal coach or an external coach. But it's the idea that someone is playing a Sherpa for you. Someone is playing someone who pushes you to the next level and gets you to think about things you've never thought about and equips you. So we use a language and we use visual tools because we realize that most adults are cynical know-it-alls and they don't read anymore. So we basically realize if that's the case, then what are the tools and what's the mindset to call people up, not call them out? And most people get called out all the time, but they don't get called up. So why do leaders need coaches? They need people to help call them up. No, Kevin, this is, okay, I see you, but this is who you are. Why do you keep operating down here? And then they can liberate by providing support, providing that challenge. But here's a key word. They can create consistency. So consistency lets other people become consistent. So it's
because they're not always guessing. So they can focus more on the production. They can focus more on the work. They can focus more on the getting better as opposed to wondering, right?
Absolutely. So it's basically, if you want to become more intentional, if you want to become someone that people want to follow, then you have to go through practice. You have to practice it, and you have to have a coach that can push you and help you practice those things to get better. It doesn't happen by osmosis. Most people drift. They don't get better in time. If they're just in the donut, making donuts every day, just getting up, doing it, the frustrations, the cares of the world, all of the other issues that come in, it enters in and it like chokes positive productivity, and negativity actually rises in a person over time. So to counter it, you actually have to fight it. You actually have to work on yourself. You have to work on your business. You have to work on your leadership. You have to work. So that means that so we just simply, our business is 100%. I've created 70 tools that I give to coaches in technology and a platform and a process around personality with the 5 voices, emotional intelligence, and skills around the 100X leader. And people tend to just love it. It works because it's common language with visual vocabulary, focused on getting people 100% healthy, and then teaching them how to multiply. The other thing I'd tell you though, Kevin, is that part of our secret sauce is everything we do is meant to go home and work with your kids and your spouse. So it works at home, then it works at work. And then it's not a bunch of leadership jargon that's not relevant to practical everyday or case studies from 20 years ago. It's actually really, really focused practical tools to help you climb the mountain.
And oh, by the way, when we practice them in one sphere of our lives, they apply and help us get better in every sphere of our lives. You said something a minute ago that I'd like you to unpack just for a second, and that's because we have people come to us, and I think it's a pretty common question. Okay, and you can answer it as how you would answer an individual leader, or how you could think about it organizationally. Either way, internal versus external coach. That's the question. Advice around that.
Yeah.
Sort of macro and micro.
So we recommend both. And so we basically say that an internal coach is basically, if you can create a coaching system, we call them catalysts inside the giant world. And a catalyst trains and gets certified on how to do it. There's positives and negatives. The positives are they're in your world. It's less expensive. They more flexible. The negatives are they can maybe be your boss. They could be it might be too close, and someone wants to be able to have some confidentiality. And the professionalism of a coach should be a confidential relationship. So an external coach can provide and maybe give you outside perspective, other business perspective, and confidentiality that you may not get. So having both set up, because we believe there should be more people coached than less. Therefore, if you have a system internally, which again we call catalyst, or if you have an external coach or a consultant who's providing that, both those are just resources to help you get better. And most people who take the time to do it and have a really experienced and have a good experience, they know the value of it, and they know that they become a more effective leader. So I would say both.
We're talking with Jeremie Kubicek, the author, the one of the senior leaders, the executive chairman at Giant, and co-author of this book, the 100X Leader. I'm going to put this link up that you've provided a link to give some special resources to people that are watching and listening to this podcast. I'll put it up real quick. It's giantcoach.com/remarkable. What will people find if they go there? Then I want to, since you went there, we'll talk about that for a second. Then I want to loop back. I've got 2 or 3 more questions for you.
So a couple of things. One, we have a process called the 5 voices. We took what Myers-Briggs came from Jungian typology and made it simpler, because we believe in scaling. You need common language that an educated 13-year-old can get. So if you wanted to take your own personality assessment called the 5 voices, you can take it for free. There's a lot of resources there. That's great. Or if you want to get certified, you can see the certification process. We decided to eliminate 2 issues that were barriers for most people: time and money, around this type of work. So we made it unbelievably inexpensive. Instead of a $7,000 certification, we made it $239 a month. So it's a very inexpensive, if you want to get certified in doing this and taking this and becoming a coach, or if you already are a coach, you just add this to your repertoire. It's great tools to add. Or if you want to become a catalyst, an internal coach, it's even less. It's $199 a month. So you can go and find out the certification details on how to implement that and, actually create a system for people development.
Giantcoach.com/remarkable, everyone. So in the world that we live in now, Jeremie, more and more people are leading and coaching and catalyzing at a distance. So you have one or two key ideas about how we do this, or what's different about doing it when we're in a hybrid mode, in a remote mode, in a virtual mode, whatever word people want to use?
Yeah, so it's still at the core, leaders define culture. Sub-leaders define subculture. So if your culture is remote, you define the culture. So that's basically on you to be intentional and not accidental. It's like, well, learn what works for your team. So part of it is almost interviewing your team. If you're remote, interview. How's it going? Tell me about your schedules like. How's your home life? Literally engaged to know their world so you can connect with them. And that's a key component towards relational trust, which is really psychological safety. It's communication and relationship. So communication and relationship are even more important in this day and age of remote. So learning what that looks like and doing that really well, then learning to do alignment. How do we stay aligned? Our team, we've been remote forever. We have a team in London, Atlanta, Naples, Florida. So we're kind of all over. But the idea of it is we do one week sprints. So we have a sprint system that we use. And we basically go, hey, on Monday, here's the sprints. On Friday, how'd we do? And we present. It's almost like our show and tell on Friday. And here's everything we said we're going to do on Monday and how'd we do on Friday. And what we found is we're more productive than those who probably are in the office even every day. And so whatever that system is like for you to stay aligned and to execute is really important, but it all hinges on your relational trust. Do people want to be with you or not? And that means that you have to be intentional and do the things that other people aren't doing.
Do people want to follow, or they have to follow? So I have two more questions for you. The first one is, and these are largely, Jeremie, unrelated to work. The first one is, what do you do for fun?
Yeah, so I'm turning 50 in a week. And so
happy birthday.
With that, thank you. And so I've been asking that question of myself too, right? Because I create content and write books, and I have 7 businesses that I'm overseeing right now. And so as executive chairman, so I've just got a lot of different things. So fun has been like, yeah, what is life giving for me? It sounds a little corny maybe, but I love to encourage people. I love to travel. I love to experience things. I do like to play fun golf. And so I like to be with people, but I like to do it around relationships. And so I create these dinners that are really fun experiences. And my wife and I, we built a neighborhood of modern farmhouse development, and we have an amphitheater. We have all of these different settings in a meeting house, and we just create experiences and try to invite people into those experiences that may not be used to them. And it's really fun.
Last question for you. What are you reading these days?
Yeah, so I love biography. I love historical fiction. That's where I go. When I'm not writing, it's hard. When I write, I can't read a ton. So I have to, I'm writing another book right now. And so I'm just but I am reading one called The Age of Eisenhower. And it's basically all about Dwight Eisenhower. And I love Dwight Eisenhower in his, what he did for this country. And what's really interesting is I've studied his infrastructure and his plans and how interstate highway system and what it did for our country. It was the biggest game changer for this. It was why we were a superpower because of that decision.
People don't realize that it's one of the biggest possible competitive advantages and countries that are continuing to struggle. Logistics and transportation is a huge part of it. So thanks for sharing that, the age of Eisenhower. And so we've talked about where people can learn more. They can learn more by going to giantcoach.com/remarkable. Special stuff there because you've had the chance to listen to Jeremie and I today. So now I have a question for all of you that are here with us. The question for you is the one I ask every single week, and that is, now what? What are you going to take from this session? What are you going to do with what you learned? Perhaps for you, it's something about some of those introspective questions that Jeremie asked. Perhaps it's something that you need to think about in terms of what you need to do with your team, interviewing your team, having that conversation with your team. Perhaps it's thinking about how you can apply the things that you know work at home, at work, or vice versa. The challenge for you from listening to this isn't to just feel engaged and entertained, and of course to go buy a book, but also to take action immediately. And so the question as always is, what action are you going to take as a result of being here? Jeremie, thank you so much for being here, sir. It was a pleasure to have you.
Kevin, thanks so much. I appreciate all you do.
This episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast is brought to you by Remarkable Masterclasses. Each month, we release a new skill in an advanced form of masterclass format designed to help you become the remarkable leader and human you were born to be. Details on how you can get on board for a specific skill or get discounts each month can be found at remarkablemasterclass.com. And every past episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast can be found on your favorite podcast app or at remarkablepodcast.com. And we'll be back next week with another episode of this Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.